I believe Ms. Walsh is on.
Yes,
You
we're going to
see her
start
screen.
with an attendance, and first I'd like to say welcome. This is the September 18th, 2024 special board meeting for the purpose of bonding, signing the bonding papers and all of that good stuff. And if you would be willing to take attendance, Cara, that would be great.
Happy to. Ms. Boucher.
Here.
Ms. Campbell.
Here.
Mr. Cotton.
Here.
Ms. Hastings.
Here.
Ms. Higgins.
Here.
Mr. Richards.
Here.
Ms. Robinson.
Here.
Ms. Walsh.
Missing you all, but here.
Can she hear me? I don't
Yes.
know. She says she's here.
I heard her.
All right. And
Sounds great.
I am here. We are all in attendance.
Okay, so we do have a board member, President Walsh, that is out of town and is Zooming in, and under RSA 91-A:2, Roman numeral 3, she has met all of the requirements to do so, to participate remotely, so we'll need to take a vote on allowing that.
Is that your
That's
motion?
That's my motion.
Second the motion.
Seconded by Sarah Robinson. And I believe
What torture you?
is a roll call vote necessary?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
for
you.
remote.
All right, let's do it. Ms. Boucher.
Yes.
Ms. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Cotton.
Yes.
Ms. Hastings.
Yes.
Ms. Higgins.
Yes.
Mr. Richards.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
Ms. Walsh. Does she get a vote?
Yes.
Thank you. That'd be funny if she was like, no. And I am a yes.
Immediately slammed her laptop.
Motion passes.
Okay, and Mr. Dunn.
Okay, we'll try to be fairly quick for this half-hour meeting. So this presentation is in your folder. And just real quick, we'll talk about the bond results, have public comment, have you vote on the bond based on the resolution bond council prepared for you, and then signatures, when there's a lot of documents back there. So first, the bid results, you had 8 bidders. That was the total interest cost when you net everything out that came in from Hilltop Securities, who's our financial advisor, and they had recommended Raymond James, who had the best overall interest and schedule for these bonds. So that's what all this paperwork does. It approves Raymond James as the winning bidder. They were the lowest cost. As you saw, that $19,975,400. This is from your FY25 budget presentation. I'm just showing you the breakdown of those amounts, and you're going to see that reflected in the next slide. Again, this is for upgrading the HVAC at Concord High School. That'll happen next summer. The Beaver Meadow School, which happened this summer, and then the buses, which will trickle in between October and next March. So this is an overview from a multi-page document. I wanted you to highlight that you see those 3 numbers that I just showed you, totaling $19,975,400. There they are, highlighted in yellow. And then in addition to that, you have the cost of the issuance, the underwriter's discount, bond insurance, and then when you're issuing 19.9 million, there's sometimes a little additional amount, so you see an extra $2299.21. And those additional proceeds can be used to pay down the debt or any other ancillary costs associated with this bond. So and when it's all prorated based on, you see the Concord High School there, and then you see the buses, and then you see Beaver Meadow. So it's very specific.
Okay.
And in our financial, in our general ledger, we have each of these broken out. And in your budget, you'll see each of those payment schedules that total up to the total payment that you have in front of you when we do this. But the investor, Raymond James, paid a bond premium of $1.686 million. So that's the amount that they contributed towards this to cover issuance costs and lower the amount of principal. So instead of financing $19,975,400, you're actually financing $18,555,000. So when you start to take all that in, you wind up with your net interest of 3.3%. You'll see on that schedule where it talks about the coupon, that's the interest rate that's paid to the investor. That's what they're buying. Okay, but what you're paying is 3.3% over the life of these loans. And I have much more detail that we can save for a finance meeting, because we'll address how this affects your budget and everything going forward. I think I put that in my email out when I sent
Yep.
this, just letting you know that we'll address it, because I know tonight's is a short night. But this is something we need to get through in order to get the money on the 26th. So so if you proceed tonight, we will get an amount next September 26th of $20,241,351.50. And then where all that money goes is right there. Pay the buses, the HVACs, and the cost of issuance. Okay? Any questions? It is a long process. I told you it is not simple.
This is not the first time.
I am also working on a comparison that if you did probably what a typical school district may have to do, where they put it into their operating budget and it's more of a lease payment, of what that differential would look like, because this is definitely the most cost effective to do. And as you get ready for the middle school, I think we'll be in good shape. The feds did announce that they were lowering interest rates today, so I
Right.
think
I
that
was
will
just
help.
going to ask, that is the one thing I had a question. This doesn't impact this proposal. It
we're
already
already-
came through. Okay.
And I'll show you when we do the finance meeting, like our early years, so it has a call date in 10 years. We had the same thing when we did the elementary school, and when we did that, if you remember, we refinanced those bonds. Call date is like a refinance, but that's when you can do it, you can't do it earlier. And when we did that, we saved $440,000 a year for the next 20 years. This has a call date of 10 years. Those yields are in the 2% range. After that 10 years, they start to jump up into the threes. So we'll see what interest rates look like in 10 years,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we're doing pretty well.
Absolutely.
I know the
Jack-
financial advisors were very excited and thought this was a great sale.
Awesome.
Jack, could you comment on when we originally talked about this, the proposal, and what you thought those rates would come in and what they did come in? Because we got some feedback that it was really good. We did very well in the market. So could you kind of give them a heads up on that?
Yep, so when they did the schedule for what we planned for the budget, they didn't, obviously, they don't put in a bond premium or anything in there, because they don't know what the investor may buy. So they gave us very conservative numbers of 4.25% for the 20-year bonds and 3.75 for the 10-year bonds. And you're getting 3.3 when you net all this together. So it's pretty good. It saves, I think the savings is about 1.9 million over the 10 and 20-year bonds.
Nice.
So
Excellent.
I have the
Yeah, that's
breakdown.
wonderful.
Yeah.
No, you did a good job, Jack. I was shocked to see a 3.3%.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, good call.
Our credit rating is a AA minus, which is still the same. We got very good rating. We'll send you that information as well. And no, it's good. And the autonomy and the ability that you have is fantastic. And it's going to help you for the middle school. There's no doubt in my mind.
Are you, we don't have to go into it too much detail, are you worried about any loss of revenue on investment accounts with the decrease in prime?
No.
I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Anything's better than the 0.5% that we have been getting. So, up until recently. As a matter of fact, we had our bank in that we work with, and we're talking about, as we're trying to build the financial model for the middle school, where can we stick that money in to earn 2-3%? So say we got 3.3% for 25, 30 years, say. How can we earn some interest on that? Because we're building a whole cash flow schedule right now. We don't need the whole amount up front. So we're also looking at different pieces of when to borrow and, how much do we borrow in the beginning. When we did the elementary, the 62.5 million was the price. We took out contingency, all the FF&E, and there was something else. We took out 7.5 million and said, let's just borrow for the building. And in the end, we didn't need the rest of it because everything fit within the 55 million. So we came in 7.5 million under budget, and the project ran well. And that's our hope, to do the same thing. We're giving you what we see, assuming the broken ground site, the 152 million. you borrowing everything at one time, the bond payment hits all at the same time. But we're gonna work that in. As people have heard me say, we did 29 different schedules of
Yeah.
multiple different letters. We've only done 2, but we're trying to lay out the expectations. Is even at the worst case scenario, we believe we can manage it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Do we have a motion?
I move.
Oh, wait.
Well, I put a public comment in here because I think you have to
Oh.
have one because you're having a board meeting.
Yep.
So
So you have to.
Seeing none.
Is there any public comment? And seeing that there is no one here, we're assuming there is no public comment. I've not received any written correspondence. Has anyone else? So seeing no public comment, we can close that time.
Okay. So, this is the bond motion that I sent you an email as a heads up. This is the actual piece. You can either choose to read it, or you can elect, based on your timing, to say you approve the motion as presented by bond counsel. And we'll have the minutes reflect that this was
What do you want?
into the meeting minutes.
What would you like?
Would somebody like to make a recommendation?
I
on
move
bond
that,
counsel?
I move that we accept, that the sale of the $18,555,000 of general obligation school bonds of the district dated September 26, 2024, as the bonds to Raymond James and Associates Inc. at the price of $20,094,179.46, and accrued interest is hereby approved and confirmed. The bonds shall be payable on September 15th of the years, and the principal amounts and bear interest at the respective rates as follows, referring to what was presented and displayed and recommended by Mr. Dunn. Is that a sufficient motion?
Yep,
That's
and-
good.
and there's-
Do the
there's
further.
second page.
I actually want you to read the whole thing.
Oh,
Okay.
No, good, sorry. I'm sorry.
and, yeah,
Okay.
is there a second?
I'll second. Cause I'm.
Because you're feeling sassy.
Brenda, you're the chair.
All those in favor?
Okay.
Or it doesn't have to be a roll call,
It's a
does it?
roll call.
Roll call, please.
It is roll call. He would like a roll call.
Okay. Ms. Boucher.
Yes.
Ms. Campbell.
Yes.
Mr. Cotton.
Yes.
Ms. Hastings.
Yes.
Ms. Higgins.
Yes.
Mr. Richards.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion passes.
All right. Is there any other business for this group?
Just the signatures.
Okay. And those are on the back table for any board members that have not
Back
signed them
table
yet.
and along
Great,
there.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay, other than
I
that.
move we adjourn.
Second.
There you go.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And this
Adjourn.
meeting is ended.
Great.
Thank you, Pam.
Nice.
Ever had.
Thank you, Pam.
6:32 p.m. This is the committee meeting for communication and policy. With me tonight is members Barb Higgins, Jim Richards, Liz Boucher, myself, Cara Meeker. Also from the district, we have Karen Fisher-Anderson and Kathleen Murphy in attendance. Tonight, we have quite a few policy drafts to go through. Without objection, we'll just go in order of what's on the agenda, which leads off with the 300 series, which is our finance policies, followed by the second time that we're seeing, actually, let me note that the 300 series has already been seen by a joint committee of policy and finance, so we'll just be continuing to work on those tonight. Same thing for policy 741 regarding facility use and fees. This is the second time that we'll be seeing it, so we'll be looking at amendments from the last working session. And then if we have time, we're going to look at policy 641, class size. That policy was reviewed by a joint committee of policy and instructional. I don't believe I have a draft of any proposals out of that, but we may have discussion around what proposals should come out of it. So with that, does anybody have any questions or comments before we proceed? Excellent, thank you. Everybody go ahead and pull your packet of policies, starting with policy 300, fiscal management plan. In your packet, it looks like you'll see the current policy followed by the amended policy draft directly following it. There are going to be a lot of policies that just have minor technical changes. My hope tonight is that we can move, if we're satisfied with our drafts, we can move the whole slate of the 300 series in one motion to first reading for the full board, unless anybody would prefer that we enter motions in individually. So for now, let's just, yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
When I put them on the board agenda, would you prefer to have just 300 series, or do you want me to list each one of them?
I would say just the series. From my just from past board meetings, I noticed we don't really have much discussion around
Right.
first reading.
Right.
So I'm not sure if listing them individually would be helpful.
Okay, because we're working on the agenda
Yeah.
this week, so, to bring to executive committee, so I was trying to decide how to present them to you. So
Yeah.
if I'll just put 300 series,
That works.
finance.
I mean, maybe
Yeah.
we could consider a cover page within the board packet
Yeah.
that says like,
That
you know,
lists them.
that lists them.
Yeah, that's a good
But we
idea.
can then pass it as a slate.
For tonight, yeah.
But can we pass it as a slate of 300s if we're making a recommendation to the board to pass all of
That's
these?
a great question. I think at the board level, we'd have to have separate motions for each individual policy. So that'll take a hot minute. So yeah, maybe we do need to list
I
them.
put extra time under
Okay.
policy on this agenda.
Okay. But for tonight, because it's a committee meeting, I think we can move the full slate, unless anybody has an objection. Excellent. Okay, so Karen, do you want to take the lead on some of the sort of technical, just kind of moving us through, or do you want me to go ahead and?
Well, the only thing I would say, I think the only thing I did compare them to the changes, and what you see and reflected are in red are just some format changes. And then I did meet with Maureen and Jack, and then I know you all made them. So other than that, the subject matter expert would not be me on these. So
Okay,
however you want
great.
to do it.
Assuming that we've all read them and studied them and know them by heart, I'm just going to move through them. I am ready to accept the single change in policy 300, which is adding an "and" to a series. Is there any discussion before moving on to the next policy?
No.
No.
Excellent, okay.
Go ahead.
Moving on to policy 301, fraud prevention. I believe that there are a couple of changes that came out of the joint committee. You'll see in red text things that were introduced to the joint committee on finance and policy. There were amendments requested from that committee. So on page 2, you'll see a sentence, which actually we may want to ask Kathleen about. It now says, any person who suspects fraud, impropriety, or irregularity shall immediately report their suspicions to the superintendent. The first draft had said any employee, because I think you can't compel any individual to report, but you can compel an employee to report.
Right.
The language was restored just because it seems like everyone should have a duty to report, so it's just a question for the committee.
We felt it would give a greater breadth of those who could suggest that there was some fraud.
Right.
Right, it wouldn't exclude anyone.
That's right. By
But it
using
doesn't
the-
necessarily have to encompass everyone either if it's not an employee.
Right, I think it's just, the question is, the terminology is shall. I don't think we can compel,
Employees.
I don't know if we can
No.
compel anyone. Can we
Right.
compel
Right,
anyone?
Right. You can't make anyone
no.
report.
Right. So I would say I'm fine with changing the language back to any person, because anyone that observes fraud should be able to report it. From my I'm just not sure we can compel anyone with that language, shall. That's my only question on that.
How about should? Just, that's encouraging, but yet not compulsory.
Right. Is highly encouraged. Do we have a preference?
I don't have a preference for that.
All right.
Shall makes it sound like that's what you do. There's no choice in the word shall.
I would,
If we can't compel people to report, then it should say should. Or something other than shall.
Has a moral obligation. I think should is probably what we can get away with.
Yep.
Further in the policy on page 3, the only additional request from the joint committee was regarding training. It's at the very bottom of the policy in F. Administrators shall be responsible for ensuring that employees under their supervision receive annual training regarding fraud prevention. We just want to make sure that it's relevant and timely.
As in before.
Before it did not have annual. Before it was just,
Could have been one and done.
So staff were not getting it annually.
No, there was no.
There needs to be some.
There was no requirement to do that, but we all felt that it was important to review that every year.
Right.
Just
Right.
like we do other.
right, so now we're introducing training as a part of our policy, and then the joint committee further elaborated that it should be annual.
Just like any other organization.
Right,
Annual fraud
yes.
prevention.
So you're good with that, right?
I'm fine
Yes.
with it. Is everybody
I'm
okay
okay
with
with
it? All right. Is
So the only change in that was to should.
shall to should.
Yep,
Mhm.
okay.
Is there any other questions or discussion around policy 301, fraud prevention and fiscal management?
No.
All right, moving on. Policy 302, authorized signatures. You can see the minor changes that was presented to joint committee, and there were no recommended further changes. Does anyone have any questions or discussion around 302? I will bring up that I believe the board had asked that maybe we need a new policy regarding electronic signatures specifically.
Right.
Is that something that is in draft form, still in conceptual?
Yeah. We did not work on that, so
Okay.
I have to do that.
Okay, it's
yeah.
What would be included in that policy?
just clarification on what is acceptable when it comes to electronic signatures. There's a lot of like people that will just use a font, like a special font, and it counts as an electronic signature, whereas like
Versus an official electronic.
like a law
time
firm will
stamped.
require
Yeah.
a stamp,
Got
that
it.
kind of thing. So
We're-
just
We're using that for all of our contracts and,
Right.
we don't have a policy on that yet, but I would agree. Too many people just change the font to cursive, a cursive option, and, that's really not a lot different than a printed option.
right, right.
So that would be where I would want the,
well, I think you
Policy
have,
to be.
when you first go on, in the case of the tool that we use, you can pick the font you want.
Right.
And then after that, that's what, every time I sign something, that's what shows up.
Must be like
But it's
tool
a-
used, okay.
electronic
It's
signature
electronic, right.
program, not just text.
Right.
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 Which is-
And that's what
Not
I would
someone
want, is
typing it
the
into
official
their phone.
text, yeah,
Right.
so.
So I will,
So, yeah.
I will we'll work on a policy that
Okay.
addresses that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that
sounds
doesn't
good.
have to be a long policy.
Yeah,
I
no.
like short
Yeah.
policies, but just something direct.
Yep, I agree. All right, any further questions on 302?
No.
Moving on, policy 309 regarding investments. You will see some added citations and no further comment from the joint policy committee. Or no, there's red text in the current policy. Karen, I'm a little confused about that.
What?
Yeah, it shouldn't have been labeled current, it should have been,
Oh, that, yeah, but,
So which draft should we be working from?
the new one, this, I'm sorry, the, one with the new text, the new changes on the back for legal references.
that's the only changes on that policy was legal references, right?
One second.
It
No,
looks like
there
Actually,
was
there
some-
are two.
Yes.
Both of them have.
Oh, I see what you're saying right now, it's been a while.
Let me go back.
Do we know which version the joint committee saw?
Hold on.
Well, if we go one by one, the RSA 197:23-A is the same in both. The second policy has their designee, which is what we had changed it to.
Bring that
So
down.
I don't have a problem with that one.
I didn't bring it down.
It's okay, I think we can treat the one that is labeled as current as an old draft.
Right.
So I think we'll work from what we're considering the newest draft. It's not substantively different. It just acknowledges that we're changing his, her to their. We're taking an acronym and spelling it out. Policies related to cash management shall be used. Yep, we're just adding a directive.
Yeah, we cleaned up a little bit of the language, right, and deleted yield, right?
Yep. I'm just reading each little
yeah.
change. I mean, I'm okay with what these changes are. Does anybody have any questions or comments on these
I don't know why that's
changes?
in red.
They seem pretty technical in nature. I don't really think it's changing anything substantive. Safety of principal is the foremost investment objective. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good with the one,
Yeah.
the new version, not the current version.
Okay, great. Moving on to policy 320, purchasing procedure. You'll also note just minor technical changes. Nothing further was recommended by the joint committee. Does anybody have any questions or comments about policy 320?
No.
Great, moving on. Policy 322, around bidding. You will see just minor changes to 322. The only additional change recommended by the joint committee was a slight language change. I believe it was shall be, and it was changed to will be. The next lowest bid will be the second one considered and will be evaluated in the same manner. I think that's fine. Does anybody have any questions or comments on policy 322?
No.
I'm good with it.
Okay. Policy 322.1, cooperative purchasing. No changes were made to this policy. All right. Policy 326, school nutrition services charging. This is sort of the meat of the policy changes for the 300s. There's quite a bit of discussion at the joint committee meeting about the language, its substance. You'll see that there are several highlights that were requested just to, I think, add clarification for language. For instance, I'm just going to go through them. When we're talking about the purpose of the policy, it now reads to treat all students with dignity regarding all aspects of meal accounts.
We're not just talking about financial accounts.
Right,
We're talking about
just dignity and anything having
aspects
to do with
of
meals.
meal.
You'll see later that we've added credit card to the list of things. We want to make sure that, it's not just cash check, but we've added credit card to make sure that's covered. In the administration, the district will provide access to applications for free and reduced price meals to all families. I believe that was before attached to their income level, and I think we're just saying everybody's gonna get one from here on out. And we're specifying that they should be speaking to the school administrator regarding those applications.
And that was because people felt like if you just call the director of food service, nobody really knows that position but would understand the school administrator.
Right.
That's why we changed all of them like that.
You'll see on page 2, it looks like we've cleaned up the language a little bit because we are now, but previously it had stated for each free meal status, reduced price status, and paid status, that a negative account balance shall not be allowed. We know that negative balances are allowed, so we've eliminated that language. But we have specified that if there is a negative balance, a la carte items are not available. From there, we've got in sections 2, 3, and 4, it just specifies the process for each, like the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school. I actually added in B myself just because it now makes it consistent with the language in 2 and 3. Let's see, no change to D. E, we've added debit card. Oop, looks like I missed a comma. Oh no.
On which one, where?
In E on page 2 of 4.
Yeah.
See where I
After
added
check.
debit card? I didn't put a comma after check.
Oh, I see, yeah.
From there, there were some discussions about how much debt a family can accrue before certain processes are triggered. So I want to call specific attention to these decisions. Reading from the very bottom of page 2, when a student's negative balance reaches what was $10 is now $0, that's when a second notice is given. Oh, sorry. The first step is if it gets down to $15, they get a notice. If it gets down to $0 now, it's a second notice. When a student's negative balance reaches $15 in negative, a demand for payment notice will be sent.
This is through the app. This is not through the school district.
I believe they are allowed at their discretion to be notified by letter, email, phone, online payment system, or district's notification system.
Okay, but currently now, the
They can go, we
notification
still do all of those,
is through the app.
It is through that.
yeah.
So
But we do send letters too. They have sent letters, especially when.
I mean, I'm just speaking from experience. I've
Right.
been in the 0, I've been
One-
negative,
yes.
and I pay it when I go
Yeah,
back, and
right.
I only get notified from the app.
right, but we use the app.
Yeah.
There may be families
We
that
may
don't.
There are
Designate
families that
the
don't
app,
use it.
So if they don't use the app, so if
have
I
to-
were to sit in a I'm just trying to understand the policy. If I were to sit in a negative, then it would trigger you, the
A letter would
administration,
come, a letter
and
would come.
eventually a letter would come. Okay, so it's just the amount of time that lapses with
Right.
that sitting in the
Right,
negative.
because
Okay.
not
And-
everybody uses the app.
And you still, you do have choices. You have the letter,
can do
email,
email,
phone,
phone
online
call.
payment system, or district's notification system. So whatever you feel is appropriate for
Right.
that family.
Right, and every family's a little different in terms of how you can reach them too, so we try to have, as you can see, a variety of ways to get in touch.
Right, and a working relationship with how the family
Right,
prefers
and
to.
then we need to use language lines sometimes, and,
Right.
you know, so phones and so
Yeah,
forth.
I appreciate that discretion, because again, not everybody uses
Right.
the same technology. What you'll note after, so we have these 3 triggers at $15, $0, and negative $15. Directly after that, you'll see stricken language. The policy previously allowed the district to take an individual to small claims court proceedings. That has been stricken. I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page with the fact that this language is coming out. This is no longer going to be an option for the district.
And it's an option that the district has never used. I wanna be clear about that, it was there, but never used.
Thank you for making
And
that point.
so, it makes sense, pull that out, there's other ways to achieve what you need to get to.
Yeah, I think I'm absolutely supportive of that. I just wanted to make sure we didn't breeze past it if anybody wanted to discuss that in any way. Great. Moving on to section F, students without cash in hand or a positive account balance. You'll notice the highlighted language from the joint committee. If the student's meal account debt accumulates to $25 or more, the parents will be requested to meet with the building principal or their designee. So that is the change that came out of joint committee. I believe there was no amount in the first draft.
Right.
It was a point of discussion. They landed on $25. I bring this up because I am nervous about $25. I feel like that can accumulate fairly quickly.
Very quickly when you,
And if I got called to the principal's office, I'd be pretty upset. So I feel like that threshold that number should be higher, personally.
Or could it say the parents may be requested to meet with the building principal? Because I could be called or notified, and then I'll be like, oh, I didn't realize, I'll just pay it. Is that the point of it? Or-
Correct, that's what I would hope that would happen,
And then
because
they don't
now
actually
we're not
have to go
wasting
in.
their time or
And
the
there's
parents' time.
actual conversation as opposed to 500 letters that never get read or ignored or whatever. I
but
think
you
it-
would have gotten notice. That call to the principal's office would not have been a surprise unless you chose not to read the letters, right?
Okay.
So I
So
don't
in that
disagree
regard-
with it's the same policy that we have, when we have the issues with an issue in school, when there's some violation of damage or something stolen or value, we increase the value because, $25 didn't seem like you could do much with, so like that, maybe that is a little low.
What is the cost of a high school meal? Because I'm trying to
Off the
take
top
this
of
to
my
number
head.
of meals.
Right.
I think it was
Right,
like a
'cause-
week's worth of,
Three-
2 weeks worth of meals.
Because I think,
No.
like, I could,
Never bought one.
Evie
Three.
with her snacking habits, she could have gone from
That's gonna be
15,
my,
15 in the
trifold with
positive
me.
to 15 in the negative, easy, like super fast.
Breakfast, lunch.
We shouldn't make it too big. My thoughts are
High school is $350.
generating a
Runlet is
discussion.
3, elementary is 2.
Yeah, I
75.
appreciate that.
5 times.
The earlier the discussion, then maybe if a parent isn't on free or reduced lunch, this is the time, have you applied for this? Money's an issue.
Right.
We can take, you haven't built up a $50, $60, $70 deficit, that could be overwhelming.
Barb, I apologize, I didn't hear the beginning of that.
Cara was worried that 25 was too quick, you could have that debt too quickly. The other side of that for me is that it generates a conversation before the debt becomes unmanageable. And maybe this is a family that could be on free or reduced lunch and isn't. Now you're having a conversation, you're in the hole now, you're in the red now. Have you thought of applying for lunch assistance? Maybe now we have $25 that may never get paid as opposed to $100 before it just generates a conversation.
prevention. No, I-
Prevention
Yeah.
ahead of time.
A big number is going to be hard for people to pay, and it may just cause them to completely diss you to begin with.
It's not
But
like
I
they
would
can't
like
eat
more
for
like
$25.
30, see, I would like 35 just because it's 1 week's worth of meals.
Yeah, right, it's a
High
solid,
school, of lunches. Now, if somebody has breakfast and lunch, it's not, but it's 1 week worth of lunches. And boy, 1 week can zip by pretty quick.
Right.
And like you said, if they're eating more than that, then it could even be quicker, so
If it's $350 and it's
got
5 days a week,
$17.50.
how do you get 35?
it's not for 1 week, it's 2 weeks, sorry.
2 weeks.
Right,
2
he's
weeks.
just saying, like, let's give people a 2-week window.
This,
Yeah.
I mean,
Before we
what I'm-
request
yeah.
that they come
What I
in.
mean is
That's
it's
fine.
a set week. It's like not a fraction of a week.
Right,
It's
I
a,
see what you're saying.
what
Yeah.
I,
Okay.
I didn't
25
communicate,
puts you
I didn't
halfway into the
communicate
next
that
week.
well.
Right.
Yeah.
But I meant that it is a whole week, not a fraction of a week, and, it's, you could get that notice, like I said, you could go rack that up pretty quick, and then, with the breakfast, that would
It's
do.
$2 for the high school, so it's $5.50.
For
per day.
breakfast is $2. So, I don't know, I think it should be higher than 25, but I also see Barb's point that I don't want it to be, $100, because now somebody's looking at this and say, oh my gosh, I can never pay that, I'm not even gonna talk to them.
Right, yeah, you don't want it to be a deterrent in that respect.
Well, let's say, I'm a parent, I'm not paying attention, I get a notice at 15, I blow it off, I get a notice at 0, I'm too busy, I get a notice at 15, which is a demand for payment, which is that print only? Or is
Well, it
it,
could be either that or you get a notice.
We
I
could
don't
test
know
it
whether
out.
they use
let's do it.
the app,
Could test
right?
it
They'll
out.
use the app
test it
or
out.
or a printed, or a phone call. I mean, it's gonna, we have that choice.
Right.
There's no assigned notice. In other words.
So are you saying they get enough notice that we could leave it
Right,
at
so
25?
I'm just playing it out in my head, the notice, you gotta come in and talk to the principal. It's all in pretty,
Yeah, by the time they need to come in, they've had
like, 3 different notices. So what a good compromise, just for the sake of it, since we're already working with $15 intervals,
Would be 30.
would be 30.
Yeah.
Does that seem fair? Okay,
I'm okay with that.
Does that get you a week?
Yeah.
That's pretty much.
Get you a week,
If you
if
have
breakfast and lunch.
But yeah, to Barb's point,
If
it's,
you're-
you know, we're trying to help be preventive
Yeah.
measures so that we're not deterring even more conflict
Right.
or anxiety about the situation.
Yeah,
right.
if you're just eating lunches at high school, it's 10 days, so it's not bad.
Okay.
When you're involved in orchestrating something, you feel like everyone knows it. And when I coached at the high school, there's athletic fees that you pay. And if you're on free or reduced lunch, you're waived from paying them. And I would have families who were like, there's no, I can't believe you have to pay this every sport, we're really struggling. And I would say, are you on free or reduced lunch? No. Well, why don't fill out that application because a lot of other things get waived. These were high school students that maybe had been in the district, families that had no clue that they could do this.
Right, it's all
So
tied
we
in.
think, oh, we send notices home all the time and blah, 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 but it isn't always that way in the families' homes. And so it's always eye-opening to me when, I had a family and the mother was like, I had no idea, she got like 6 kids. I'm like,
Right.
saved her hundreds of dollars
Yeah.
and that she could have not paid 2 or 3 years prior.
Mm-hmm.
So I bring that up just because we go over this all the time, so for us, we feel like it's common knowledge.
Right, it's known.
Yeah,
But that's why I'm so glad that that the language changes to all families.
yeah.
Because
right.
now you don't have the stigma of saying, could I have one of those forms?
Well, it has
Everybody
been going
gets
to
it.
all families for quite some time.
We've been doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I like it being in the
Yeah.
policy.
Right.
In
And
the policy.
The
you're right.
language is more inclusive because even though it was going out, like I saw it and I'm like, oh, well, I'm not going to fill this out because I don't think I qualify. But now I'm even seeing language on, from the PTOs that's like, we're getting all families to fill this out. Like it's bringing people in, which is good.
There's no stigma associated with it. All families are filling it out, and I think that's a good,
Right.
I don't want to single anybody out, student or parent or
Very difficult.
family member,
Right.
whoever the family member would be.
All right, moving
All right.
on to section G, because we're still talking about dollars, I just want to make note that the joint committee recommended a NSF fee of $5 to be incurred for checks that don't go through. I think they set the fee because I think we needed it to be something, but we didn't want it to be punitive. I agree that $5 is sufficient. Is there any discussion or questions about that? Great.
Does the business administrator have the ability to waive that for an individual who couldn't pay very much?
Are you at
The
number 4?
NSF fee.
Oh, I see. Oh,
I would hope that they have their discretion.
yeah.
We don't have to write it in here, but I would hope that as an administrator in an extenuating circumstance.
It's a great point, and yes, to answer your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's one small change to section F, which is all new. It's all new text in this section, but the joint committee made clear that the principal notifies the business administrator, not the food services director, if additional action is needed.
Right.
There's no further changes to I or J or K or L or M. I did want to make note, I had noticed it after we had submitted these changes, and I apologize, but there is some there's some policy language from the original policy that isn't incorporated into this draft. We've got some
So
Just-
we missed something in the
yeah, just a
original?
few sentences here and there from the original draft just didn't make it over. So if we do approve this tonight, I would ask that the committee allow me to make those technical updates, just making sure that the
Okay.
full text of the
Okay,
original
yeah.
policy was in there. It's nothing that is of consequence, but we just
Yeah,
wanna make sure
okay,
everything is
okay.
laid out correctly. Any other questions or discussion around policy 326? Great, moving on. Policy 350, fixed assets. Very minor technical changes with no further changes from the joint committee. Are there any questions or discussion around policy 350?
No.
Great, moving on. Policy 361, food service funding. You'll see minor changes. I don't think I actually made this change, I can't remember now, but there is highlighted language. The second paragraph, the sentence now reads, food services will be supported through revenues generated from sales and state and federal reimbursement.
That was the only change on that policy.
Yeah?
Yeah, in my
Okay.
notes, remember when I had trouble with that one?
Yeah,
That's, yeah.
okay. Seems like a pretty clear sentence to me. I have no
Yeah.
additional questions or discussion points on that. Moving on, policy 362, trust fund. It is a one-line policy, so I'm just gonna read it. The current policy reads, the school district has the responsibility of trustee for the Concord Teachers Benefit Trust. It now reads, the superintendent acts as the trustee for the Concord Teachers Benefit Trust. That makes a lot of sense to me. Any questions or discussion around that? Great. Policy 381, Runlet Scholarship Fund. It looks like the changes are merely technical. Are there any, there seems to be a question at
There's
the
a
end.
yeah, that
Tell me
was,
more about that.
Should have been, we should have deleted that.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my thought.
That was a question we had, and it should have got deleted, and it didn't, so that's
Okay.
my fault for not.
but did we
catching
include the principal from, on that above, which it's not, or
No,
do we
no,
not? And
no.
why did we not put the principal of RMS on it?
Because they really, it's a high school scholarship, so they let
Fair
the
enough.
scholarship team do it.
very good. All right, so we're
As
gonna,
opposed to a graduating senior.
Kara, I did have a
Yeah.
question on, I'm sorry, going back real
Yeah.
quick on 362.
Mhm.
Do you want superintendent capitalized? Because we did, on 381 for consistency's sake, the position, and we've done principal.
well, but then we
But
don't,
then-
but then we don't capitalize it in 362. My
Okay.
feeling is, at this point, the only term that I think is capitalized is district. It's different policy to policy, so I will say, why don't you just make it consistent within the document, and I'll be happy.
Principal, same thing? Because I think we did say the principal, and another one, I just wanna, like the principal of the high school, so.
Yeah, I mean, again, as long as it's consistent within the policy itself,
Okay.
because for me, it's, there is no winning, with this at the moment, just because every single policy has something different in
Yeah.
terms of, like, we capitalize job titles sometimes, we capitalize the district sometimes we say school district, sometimes we say district, sometimes, like,
Yeah,
so whatever you think is best there.
got it, okay, thanks.
Okay, so we note that we're removing the editorial note on policy 381, and other than that, there are no further questions or discussion. Great, that concludes the 300 series. Do I have a motion to move the 300 series to the full board on first reading? So
Liz?
moved by Ms.
Liz?
Boucher. Do I have a second?
Yes, second.
Seconded by Mr. Richards, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No, great, that passes 4-0.
Okay, we'll put that on, and I like the idea of a cover sheet, we'll list it, okay?
Great. Sorry, just catching up my notes here. Okay. Moving on to policy 741, facility use fees. Now I have to find it, here we go. All right, so the first time we met about this, Matt Cashman was here to answer a lot of our questions around how the facilities are used, how we collect money for renting out facilities, And it's really just sort of a beefing up of the policy itself, making sure that we have language around what can and can't be done in facilities, prohibited activities, the kind of safety measures people need to take when they're renting facilities, all that good stuff. We were also given at that time the pricing sheet. You guys remember this? The pricing sheet. The terminology,
Everybody have one? Right.
it will be helpful to have it if you have extra copies.
Does everybody have?
I don't have,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I do
That
either.
does anybody else over there need it?
I do not want one. Do you need one?
No, I don't need one. Thank
It's
you.
stuck.
Thank you.
I want to give you colored. Another one?
Yes. No, you have one.
I got one.
All right.
I have one, thanks.
So I'm glad we all have a copy because I think this is going to be important as part of our discussion because originally we had talked about who gets what in terms of deals and priority. And we had talked about civic groups was a defined term in the original policy. But the spreadsheet calls them affiliated groups. So between the last meeting and this meeting, I met with Matt Cashman to get clarity on what the terminology should be. And we landed on what you see before you, which is everything that's highlighted in yellow were changes that we requested as a committee or that conceptually we were looking into that Matt and I kind of like worked out and made into a new draft. So things that have changed since the last meeting, rather than a civic group, we are now calling them affiliated groups. Means a group or nonprofit organization whose mission benefits school-aged children residing primarily in Concord, including but not limited to the Boy Scouts of America, Big Sisters of America, Girl Scouts of America, the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, and now added parent-teacher organizations or associations and booster clubs. And a new Pren B, the City of Concord and their municipal departments, divisions, or committees such as Parks and Recreation.
Cara,
Should-
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. Well, I think we're both on the same page.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When I looked at the change on the affiliated, and I probably put that in there because I used a Hampton go-by when I put this chart together. When I pulled it up and started researching it, I started thinking about churches and politics. I mean, we get religious groups, obviously with the churches, the politics, all kinds of things, and I wondered if, and there's some tax tie-ins when you say affiliated, believe it or not. So I started looking for other language possibilities because I know that we do rent to at least one, if not two, church groups in our elementary school. So I'm not sure that B part, or excuse me, the second part of the sentence where it says whose mission benefits school-aged children. So I wondered if maybe a discussion about potential language like other community groups, local groups, sponsoring organizations.
Molly B Foundation.
What's that?
So I have a foundation, the Molly B Foundation, which
Yeah.
is all for
Foundations.
kids. It's a 501c3, it's a
Yep.
nonprofit, so.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to nitpick it too much. I just think, I started thinking about politics and church, and I thought I'm not sure that that's the affiliated group
Okay.
piece.
Are you recommending that we make it a civic group?
That's where it was before, but I also think you could have sponsoring organizations, or you could have community groups, or local
So
groups.
I think what Karen is saying, that affiliated group it infers a separate term.
Correct, and more so too, where it talks about whose mission benefits school-aged children.
Right.
And some of the groups that we have in, the church groups, the politics and stuff like that, I would say that probably isn't true, so I'm wondering if we could think of a different term. We didn't want to use civic, but,
Right, so I'm just going to point to the existing policy. A
Yep.
civic group is a nonprofit organization whose mission benefits school-aged children residing primarily in Concord. So the language has been moved to a definition section, but
Right.
the language reflects current policy. So if there's a policy recommendation
you want.
that we need to expand that definition beyond what is any group whose mission benefits school-aged children residing primarily in Concord.
Right.
So you think we need to take that out altogether?
Or.
Could be argued, easily argued, that any group it has a responsibility. Political groups will tell you that they support children, and churches certainly have, when we rent to the churches, they often have little kids there, and
Right.
they're part of the service.
Right, I interpret this definition affiliated group to help define group C in facility
Right.
use fees. So then it wouldn't pertain to anyone who's renting as renters who are paying the fee. Is that what we're trying to define here?
They're defining who has to pay a
The full
fee and
fee.
how much of a fee.
Right, and so anyone who's affiliated, or whatever term we
Would
use,
pay a lesser fee.
is not gonna
Not
pay
paying
a fee.
anything, yeah.
Right.
according to
But
our
so
chart.
do churches, political organizations, anyone else
Yeah, they pay.
They
would be
pay.
paying, so they wouldn't fall under this.
Well, I also have a problem with the
But-
fact that an affiliate group means a group or nonprofit organization. So it can be a for-profit group, because that's the first part, that benefits kids. Well, I can make $500,000 benefiting kids and not pay a single thing. So
Well,
I don't think that would be a good idea.
activities sponsored, so a facility rental fee may be waived, this is something we'll discuss, may be waived for the following situations: activities sponsored by the district or other affiliated groups, provided that no event fees are charged to the participants.
Right.
So this wouldn't be somebody getting a $50 waiver in order to make $500,000.
No, that's because you couldn't do an events fee, but I could sell them things.
Well, can we just say it means a group whose mission and benefits?
I would put a non-profit, so why would you not make it a non-profit group or organization as opposed to a group or
Well, if we
non-profit?
use the word nonprofit, so we're saying they all have to be 501c3s.
They do not.
So then do we need to use the term nonprofit?
I don't know.
Well, you can not have a 501c3 and still be a not-for-profit organization.
Right.
Molly B was a nonprofit long before I got the 501c3. It just separates what you can do in that. Like without the 501c3, I couldn't use the fundraising that goes through the dog racing, the Belmont, the gambling. You can make great money for you, but you have to be a 501c3.
Right.
I wasn't allowed to do that, but I had an EIN number that in the state of New Hampshire, I was a registered nonprofit. Then I went further and got a 501c3. So there's,
So as long as you're what about insurance? Like if we're talking about if an event is happening, they need to have insurance.
so the renter, that would be there. Like when I do the Barb's track camp is run through the foundation, I don't take any of the money. And so I have to get my own insurance to run track camp there. So I have a sports camp insurance company so I take care of all that. But I pay much less for the Memorial Field than a for-profit camp would pay, which is a
Right.
good thing.
So to note, there is a,
I still pay.
right, there's a nonprofit rate in the spreadsheet.
Right.
So it is true that we don't necessarily have to include nonprofit organization in the definition of whatever we're gonna call this, because there's always a nonprofit rate for whatever group it might be. So I think it would be okay to, let's pretend it's still affiliated group for now. Affiliated group means a group or organization. And we need to decide, do we think that it should be a group or organization who benefits school-aged children residing primarily in Concord?
Those tend to be the groups that use our facilities anyway.
Right.
Like it's,
Yeah, I'm trying to,
Yeah.
maybe there's examples the district's aware of who's using. I don't know who's been using the facility. that
usually
this
it's
would
Girl
pertain
Scout
to.
troops and Boy Scout troops, it's PTOs, it's sports teams. Like whenever I did the cross-country banquet, it was in the student center at the high school. I didn't have to pay to do that.
Girls on the Run.
Yeah,
Yeah, churches. And that's-
yeah, the churches use the auditoriums on Sunday mornings.
PACs, political action,
Yeah, we had that
there's a
one.
lot of political, like the people who caused the gun issue
Right,
was someone who was using our facilities.
Did they have
Yeah.
the rental fee waived?
I don't
Like,
know.
or
Were
are
they
they-
a
or are they
nonprofit?
a
What did they
renter?
Who
pay?
is having their rental fee waived right now? Like, that's what I don't know.
Yeah, who is Group C, wouldn't Group C be, like,
Group C specific,
would be, I would think, with Concord School District groups.
that's how I interpret
Or like
this.
Yeah.
like the Krista McAuliffe Brownie Troop group. I know other kids from other schools might go there, but they wouldn't have to pay to use the school because it's all Concord students. Like
Right.
it's but
Youth
Molly B
basketball?
Foundation doing a free night of music, well, I'm a foundation that's not, I'm not doing that,
So,
doesn't it get all weird?
Specific for kids,
Yeah.
like
It's
specific.
Right.
Good. So like, a breast cancer walk would fall under B, right?
a
Yes.
501c3.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
I do,
The
sorry.
Kiwanis Carnival would fall under A? If indeed they used a facility?
Yeah. Like the Kiwanis
If
Trade
if
Fair.
it is a
We're having
for-profit
it at-
organization.
At Runlet, at the new school and all those fields, yeah, they'd have to
So-
pay.
I
Right.
will say that Matt and I went back and forth about this, and where we were getting stuck is the original and the first draft of the new policy said a facility rental fee shall not be charged for these things. We decided there's always gonna be an exception.
Yeah,
So why don't we change the language to a facility rental fee may be waived for the following situation?
I
That's way
like that
better.
much
So
better.
now you, like, the facilities director has the discretion to say, you don't necessarily fit, but we're gonna waive the fee because we feel that your mission is children-oriented, or this is a long-standing carnival, or whatever it is. It just puts discretion, a little more discretion in the hands of the district.
And I think that's
I
important.
think that's
Because
good.
you'd
I
be
agree.
amazed at the requests that come across and
Yeah.
you make that decision, and we've had that happen this year.
Yeah.
And, so I think that giving us a little bit of room to make decisions is helpful.
Yeah, I would.
Cause I just don't know if we're gonna get, I don't know if we're gonna get a groups A, B, and C that are perfect.
Right.
No, there's always yeah,
Yeah,
I
aspects
think,
of both.
yeah, I think the wording that you proposed is good.
yeah.
It's under
So-
two.
And we can address that when we get there. Do we wanna just come back to the term affiliated
Yes,
group?
yes,
And see if
let's
it,
just
what
come back to that.
fits? But for now, that group, this definition now aligns more with what's in the spreadsheet that's already in existence, which incorporates, booster clubs, parks and rec, city services, things like that. No change, custodial fee, damage fee, we went over what that entails. We've added an employee fee, means the cost of one or more designated district employees assigned to an event to supervise the individuals and protect school property. This is a newly defined term because this is a new ask in the policy, which is that if you have a certain threshold of people, the district is probably gonna ask that somebody be on site that is an employee of the district and the renter's gonna have to pay for it.
Not
And
just the
that's not new.
custodial.
That requirement is not new at all.
Right, I think it just wasn't in
In
the
the
policy. School facility, we updated to just make sure that it incorporates all buildings, property, and facilities owned by the district. And then there's no further changes to the definitions, but we can talk about them if you want.
Can I ask a question
Yeah,
about
please.
definitions? I was reading this, at the introduction and purpose, at the last line, it talks about non-school functions. Do we need a definition of school functions versus non-school functions? The reason I say that is because are these things we're waiving related to school function? May use school facilities for non-school functions unless such use is scheduled. Like, for example, PTO doesn't register through the district's facilities rental coordinator for all of theirs activities.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like if we're using the library, we ask Chris, can we use the library at this time?
And it's after school hours. I think what the district is saying is that you guys are gonna have to start paying to have a custodian on site.
This is my concern.
I think that this is
So
where
there
this is
already
going.
is.
There already
There
is a
already is.
custodian on site. And
During the
my-
week, during working hours, yeah. Do you ever meet on the weekends?
So this is where like now we have budgets
Right.
that we have to factor in, that we're not gonna be able to host events after. We're not gonna be
understand
able
the
to have
concern.
Meetings after.
Yeah, I think the sentiment was anytime staff have to set up, break down, stay longer, be present, there is essentially a charge to the district in labor. And should the district pick up that cost for a 501c3 because it's also happens to be the PTO? Are you an exception to the rule?
Right, it's the PTO or PTA exception because the money's going back to the school.
Yeah, see, I think that would be a school function. PTA is, to me, in my mind, is a school function.
yeah.
It's parent, teacher,
Right.
association or organization.
We're
that's-
paying for field trips, we
Correct.
pay for teacher supplies.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that,
Yeah.
I would think that would be no different than a concert at the school, the
So
McCall
I just
Schools
wanna
Rec
make sure
concert.
that's clear in the policy.
Right, so you think the definition of a non-school versus a school event?
I don't know if that solves.
To me, PTO
solves
is school,
the-
Molly B Foundation, non-school, like, to me, that's two very different.
So then it's not an affiliated group, or whatever that term is.
Right, I do think that, I'm not gonna speak for our facilities director, I think, but it's possible that that the district is moving in a direction of holding all affiliated groups accountable for some level of cost of
I understand having to pay the
using
employees,
facilities.
but I don't understand how that's gonna be sustainable for the PTOs, especially smaller
Yeah.
PTOs.
So you would like to carve out,
I don't think Booster Club should be in here either, they're offsetting costs for school district kids, it's.
Kathleen, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah,
I see
a
you
couple
looking.
things. We really have to be careful about the PTOs. They are part of the school.
Yeah.
They are part of the whole, so and we've always taken care of that and covered it if it required a custodian. It's built into our budget, not the PTA's, or the PTO. Is one PTA, right?
Yeah.
Is one. The Booster's an interesting one because they run a lot of events.
Right.
And tournament events where people pay to come in. They often use multiple areas in a school. I think of the high school mostly. We've had wrestling tournaments, and it's sponsored by the Booster Club, but it is a significant impact financially. So we have been, expecting some payment based on the status of Group A, B, C.
Okay,
So-
that I can, like a Booster Club event, where
Yeah.
you're charging people, they should
Right,
pay for
yeah.
it.
Right.
Like, when I think of the high school and the things that I remember doing there, I never had to pay myself, when I had my cross-country banquet, I didn't have to pay for
No,
the custodian.
or when we have a play and we need a custodian
Right,
there
right.
to
Right.
oversee that, or,
But when there's,
right, we don't
um,
charge,
when there's an entry fee,
that's the
then
difference.
now, yeah, then I think
And
the
they're often
custodial.
selling food,
Selling stuff.
They're selling stuff, they're selling clothing,
Merch.
wares, right, shirts, food, and there's a fee, absolutely.
Yeah,
So it's hard to do this policy because there is so
Right.
many, I mean, we've had situations where I had a family, many of you may know the family, and they needed a place to have a funeral service. So, you know what I did, right?
yeah, give them a place to have a funeral.
I gave them a place to have a
expensive,
funeral
yeah.
service, and there wasn't any charge. They couldn't afford a regular place, and I thought, these are our families, right? So, that doesn't happen a lot, it's few and far between, but just know that
I know, but let me counter with the existing policy and the current draft. The superintendent or their designee may waive or reduce rental fees for good cause consistent with the intent of this policy. The certificate of liability, custodial fees, damage fees, and any extra setup charges shall not be waived.
Yeah, we looked at that.
So we can either change this policy to be permissive for not just rental fees, but other fees as needed, so that you have discretion for PTOs,
Right.
you have discretion for booster activities that are within sort of the
right.
realm of, school activities for community efforts. That's what I'm hearing, is that we need that flexibility.
I think we do, we've been somewhat criticized too, that we're not flexible enough for everyone to be able to use our facilities. I think you heard that from the city, and so not that is totally the reason for being flexible. I just think we have so many groups that aren't out to make money. The PTA, if they have an event, is raising money so that they can afford to buy things for the kids and field trips and pay overhead costs. The Booster Club is an interesting one because they're supporting our teams, of which there are things that they do that are not in our budget. And in other districts, they would be in the budget. Okay, but we don't. Our booster clubs are pretty active and pay a lot of things. New uniforms, for instance, the football team got new uniforms, all paid by the booster club. So, right? It's this
Well,
balance. So
Yeah, you have to be fair,
Yeah.
right? The food at the football field is sold by what would be considered a booster club.
yes, it was. Yes, it was.
The music, yeah.
But to
then
raise
there's a-
money only to put it back into the school.
Right.
Put it back into their designated club.
Yeah, the music, well, but, yeah, music, theater, all that.
Yeah,
So when I go to a play and I pay, X amount of dollars to attend the play, that goes into the, the kitty, if you will, of the music program, so that they can buy music, they can buy playwrights, they can buy,
Yeah.
costumes.
yeah, it's the arts. It actually goes into the
It's-
general
so
arts
it
program.
I think we would be remiss at making it so defined that we wouldn't have that flexibility as you coined it. So I hope you'll think about that.
Here's another example, the wrestling club, their booster club paid for
Oh,
the
boy,
kids to have
huge.
access to sports, to a club so they could work out off-season,
Oh,
for
okay.
those kids only on the team, so that's how.
They would pay for the
No, off-school property.
Oh, off-school
They actually went to
property,
another
okay.
gym so they could work out off-season.
All right, so I'm hearing a couple of things. Number one, I think we need to carve out exceptions for PTOs, PTAs, and booster clubs.
Yep, I do.
So long, I feel like maybe there needs to be some language around, so long as their event is in.
It's supporting school.
Thank you, yeah, like is somehow, like the money is
Supporting
going back
school
to.
district activities,
Yes.
yeah. Programs,
It
yes.
supports
Right.
your opening statement, I'm going back to it, wherever the opening statement was, about why we do this, right?
Recognizes that our public school facilities belong to Concord residents.
Right,
And,
I mean-
when we're focused on students.
yeah.
Okay.
I like that statement, but I also don't like that statement because it's not, if we're saying it belongs to Concord residents, it's not just, we're not really opening the school to everyone. We're saying it belongs to you, but you still have to pay a fee if you wanna rent it. That's my concern about that opening
Yeah.
statement. It's, we're trying to be welcoming, but yet these are all the restrictions and it's not just,
But if it's a for-profit company, that's not a hard ask, but if it's
Right.
the food pantry that wants to do an activity at Kristen McAuliffe, that's a whole different story. Do you see what I'm saying in terms of community?
right, it belong to Concord residents in support of community or
Yeah.
something, like in support
In
of.
support of community, cause that only affects our kids again, that really does.
So are you asking that we amend a sentence in the introduction?
That was just something that I had thought of,
Yeah,
that I
no,
really didn't.
and I fully respect. Like, I'm not saying it like, do you want to do this? I'm saying I invite you to amend the policy if you think something isn't.
A consideration that I had was how strong the first sentence comes off with the inability to actually, everyone just say, oh, this is my backyard, I can just walk into any school. So we certainly welcome that the facilities be used by anyone who can, and we have the discretion that if you come to the superintendent needing to use the facility for X, Y, Z, that she has the discretion, as long as it's related to community building or students or some other language than just to say any Concord resident can just come and have a book club.
Got it. I'll wordsmith it. I appreciate it. But going back to then, we're jumping ahead, but since we're on this topic, do we think that the superintendent should have the discretion to waive certificate of liability? Do we think they should have the discretion to waive custodial fees, damage fees, and any extra setup charges?
No, I don't think we should waive
No.
those. I mean, those are protecting your assets, which is your
right,
damage or, that's why an insurance policy, all activities that use the
Right.
facilities do provide an insurance. With that said,
Mhm.
however, there have been an occasion that I have allowed somebody to use the building in an emergency. I sort of alluded to that a few minutes ago.
Right.
Mhm.
That couldn't, you know how expensive the insurance policies are?
Right.
Yes.
And so I made sure that there was some custodian there to make sure everything went well, and of course it did.
So I think,
I'm just trying to be really open about
Yep,
all
no.
the things that happen in your schools.
I think this is an important conversation
Yeah.
because I don't want to make a policy that doesn't actually affect our residents and just ends up confusing them.
Right?
So if you, like, I would push back about putting in our policy that you can waive the certificate of liability, but I'd be happy to give you discretion to waive custodial fees. Because there is a flat custodial fee even for Group C.
Right.
You know, it doesn't matter if you're an affiliated group and all this sort of, according to this spreadsheet, even if you have your rental fee waived, you have $50 an hour for setup and cleanup, $50 an hour for the employee on-site fee, and then $50 an hour for custodial fee, damage fees as needed. So maybe I wouldn't necessarily give you discretion to waive damage fees
I
either,
wouldn't want to
No.
waive damage fees.
but custodial fee, employee fee, setup fee, I mean, does that seem reasonable?
Where's the damage fee on?
There are,
It's on,
It's actually, it's not on the
Seven.
spreadsheet, we wrote it
Just
in
seven.
and asked Matt to fill it
Got
in.
it, got
It's now a new,
Got it.
it says damage fees as needed for each group. And he's gonna make that change.
And that could be retroact, like that could, if there was damage.
Yes,
then
that
it
is
could be
actually in the
charged,
policy.
'cause I do feel
Mhm.
that if the PTO caused damage to the school, we would be
Right.
charged, right? The Booster Club would be
Right. Oh,
charged
yeah.
retro.
Right.
I agree, I'm concerned about waiving liability.
I would be very concerned about liability and damage. Custodial, even custodial, I'd make it at your discretion, because say my PTO just decides we're going to have basketball night at the school, and guess when basketball night is? It's every night. And now you're paying somebody $50 an hour that's coming out of the taxpayer money for every night. That's,
That's
Right,
a lot.
right, right.
that's,
I think that's a good
and
example.
that, you need to be careful of how you word it.
Right.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I
a
also
good
think
example.
most groups assume they would have to pay it. I mean, a funeral is a completely different,
Yeah.
doesn't
this
even
happens to
count
be
in
something
here.
that-
in my
Had
mind,
to make a
that's an
decision.
act of community service and, but I would never think I didn't have to pay some of those basic things. Custodians have a right to earn money, and it isn't always a taxpayer's job to pay them when they're coming to work an extra,
Alright,
yeah.
so,
And remember, usually when they're working like that, it's over their regular 40
It's overtime,
rate.
yeah.
Right, right,
It's
right.
overtime. That's why it might seem like $50 an hour, wow, they make a lot, but you know, you
No,
gotta
that's
remember,
time and a
it's
half.
time and a half.
so would we agree as a committee that I could craft some language that builds in some discretion for the superintendent regarding custodial fees and setup charges, but not certificate of liability or damage fees?
Right.
Yes.
It could
Yes.
be, it could be
I'm okay with
in
that.
language that reads like, you know, the following fees shall not be waived, all of them. Unless there are overarching circumstances that would indicate that these two fees could be. And then there's that.
Right, I think it would be good to have language around extenuating circumstances
exactly.
rather than just when the
Right.
superintendent feels like it.
Yes. Yeah, when there are extenuating circumstances, she has the right to, or the authority to. Then it still doesn't say that she will,
Yeah.
but there's that wiggle room in there.
Alright, thank you for that, it's good.
Number 7, it's just missing, I think it's just missing of, breakdown of a facility space.
Where are you?
On the last number 7 definitions.
Oh.
It's just a technical,
Oh, I apologize, I was in a different seven.
sorry.
Setup fee means the amount charged for the setup and breakdown of a facility. You are correct, thank you. Awesome. Okay, so going back up to the top of page 2, in B, use fees and authorized uses of school facilities. Nothing changed in Pren 1 from the first time we discussed. Number 2, as I said, we've modified the language to say a facility rental fee may be waived in the following situations: activities sponsored by the district or other affiliated groups, provided that no event fees are charged to the participants, and municipal, state, or federal elections. I do want to make note that we currently do not charge any amount for municipalities to use our school facilities for elections. This opens the door for that possibility in the future, should we want to exercise that discretion. Because prior, it used to say we shall not, and now we may not. Because we're shutting school down, and we've got custodians on site all day. It's probably one of the more significant expenses in terms of facility use. So I just wanted to make note of that.
But just remember, now you get other things from the city.
100%. It is a relationship.
I just want anybody out there to think that they get a free ride, but we don't get any.
Yeah,
No.
we're not coming
Right.
for the city, I'm just
So,
saying.
you know, the plowing, the sidewalks, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The trash pickup, all that.
Yeah.
So I just-
Yes.
Yeah.
I do think there is balance. I asked Matt his opinion. He thinks it's a balanced situation right now. I think there's a lot of give and take. It's a good relationship. Should that change, should this become financially cumbersome for us, it gives us the chance to have that conversation.
I just have one question about
yeah.
each year on July 1st. Each year, the superintendent or their designee shall publish a fee schedule. Is that a hard ask every year? I mean, I would just assume that if it's not published one year, we use the previous years. So I
we
didn't know,
just republished every year.
Yeah.
we post it.
is that what that means? It's just saying reposting it doesn't necessarily,
So it needs to be
We gotta make sure it's up there.
acknowledged annually that you're sort of certifying those
Okay.
rates for the year, because it's the fiscal year.
okay.
So I can see why that would be required, but it sounds like you just sort of bump it forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just was confused if she had to read, if there was some way to, it was being adjusted every year.
Great. The only change left on that page 2 is we added injury to the all applicants for use of district facilities shall hold the school district free and without harm from any loss, damage, liability. Now includes injury or expense that may arise. Matt had asked that for just making sure we're fully covered. I agreed. On to section C, school facility rental process. The only things that changed were things we had discussed already, which is that we wanted to make sure that when we talk about applications be submitted 21 days prior, that we mean calendar days. In number 5, we tightened up the language around that the fact that the renter is responsible for following up-to-date weather information. And we added a sentence: extended or annual rental contracts for affiliated groups may be negotiated separately at the discretion of the district, because we had a couple of those groups that have annual contracts.
Right.
And they just weren't otherwise covered in the policy, so we just added that in. Same thing for D. We just added some language to make sure that things were clear, noting that we always are now calling them a renter rather than a group or whatever.
Right, so then my question there was a renter, meaning that you're paying. If we're waiving fees and they're not paying, does it still apply to them? We're still calling everyone a renter.
I think anyone who's using the facility is a renter. I think that's what we agreed on, but we can certainly, do you think we need separate?
Well, I wouldn't think a PTO was a renter. That's weird.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, when I did my banquet, I wouldn't be a renter.
Just because,
It's a
I
school
just
group.
asked that, I mean, if we're all in agreement one way or another, fine, but I just asked that because if we're talking about restrictions, security, safety, I wanna make sure it applies to everyone in the building, not just people who are renting.
Okay.
We don't define renter.
No, we don't. It sort of just
I just
assumes,
went back to look, and we really didn't.
right, because, I mean, as we sort of follow the flow of the policy, we get to, use fees and what's authorized, then we get to the school facility rental process, and then we start talking about facility use. So at that point, we start talking about the
So that would be
renter.
if somebody were renting it, so not every word of every policy applies to every group that's using a
So you could
piece of
just
the
have
building.
renters / and another word that covers those groups, like,
renters slash groups, you know, then
Yeah,
you'd be
I
a
can-
group, not a renter.
Yeah, something
Alright,
like
so
that.
rent-
It used to be
Renter-
groups, wasn't it called groups before?
Affiliated
Yeah.
groups.
Yeah, it was.
Groups.
Yeah, so we could just decipher.
Yep, renters.
Church is a renter,
PTA's a group.
right, Molly B Foundation would be a renter. Even if I didn't have to pay, I'm an external organization coming into a building that I don't have a connection to.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever we see renter, can we do that? Can we just put renter?
Renters or groups.
Yeah.
Well, but let me ask so let's go back up to C.
Yeah.
School facility
6.
rental process. Do groups participate in the rental process?
Not always.
Do
No.
they submit online?
No.
Right, so all of these things that say renters don't apply to you. It doesn't mean you
Well,
don't have to be.
the safety and security still do.
It will, yeah.
Prohibited conduct still does.
Yeah,
All right, so do you
Enforcement.
think
so when we're talking about those things, it should be renters and groups. When we're talking about things that are the rental process is renters.
right? And do we think all groups should participate in the online rental process?
No, because as a cross-country coach, I wouldn't wanna have to get on the stupid computer to reserve.
Well,
You see what I'm saying?
You think
Like-
about all the activities, you know,
No.
we were at
We're just over
Beaver Meadow.
policying now.
We were
Yeah,
at Beaver
but-
Meadow the other night, and you should see the list of things that they do. Jim, with the PTA.
Well, I was gonna say, so if you showed up with your cross-country team for dinner, but somebody else was there,
Well, no,
and you can't go,
Well,
would you be
have to-
happy?
Well, you'd still go through the
You have to reserve
administrator.
your, I would go to, who did I go to?
Hmm.
I'd go to the principal and say, hey, I wanna have my banquet Sunday, is there anything going on in the student center? What are the open nights? I would find when the nights were open, and you pick an
Yeah,
open
and
night.
Glenna would know that. She would have she
Right.
has a calendar of every event that's going on. But I think about some of the,
Well, there's no way to reserve
The
without
timing.
paying the fee online, right? Don't you
No.
pay as soon
No.
as you go through that process? So, could it say user instead of renter or group? Could it say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a
School
user would be an
facility
easier
user
one, cause then it
process,
covers the
facility
groups
user
that Barb is saying,
restrictions.
that
Yeah.
couldn't use
Users.
it,
Okay,
but we're not gonna rent.
Right, like
or
it
create
wouldn't
rental
get
things.
rented when when an external group came to try to rent the student center, it
The
would not
users
be
would be
available.
there, yeah.
Right,
yep, I
That
can
would be
appreciate
the
that.
better way.
yeah,
because you have first priority.
right.
All right.
Right, that
So
would
the
be
only
better.
time we really talk about renters is in C, which is for people who are part of the rental process, who have
Okay.
to apply online, who, you know, are an outside,
Right.
well, then I think we need to move number 2 and see somewhere else. But,
Say that again. Karen.
sorry, I'm just thinking out loud now. So under C, it begins with the facilities rental coordinator is responsible for maintaining a master schedule of all uses of school facilities for school and non-school activities. So this isn't just about renters. Number 2, it actually lays out the priority. School-sponsored activities have priority. Second is official activities of the city of Concord. And third, those activities serving the use of the community. All other requests are shall be based on availability.
Right.
So this section is actually talking about all users.
Right.
So I think we need to suss that out a little better, which I will do. I'll come back with it. Okay, so facility use restrictions, everything was pretty much the same as what we had discussed initially. We had changed the language around the handicap placard, just to be up to date with terminology. And then E, this is the big one. If you remember the last time we met, it had been recommended that we require a person to be certified online as a crowd control manager at the request of the fire marshal and his staff who are no longer able to do in-person trainings. We went back and forth about that in committee. I continued that back and forth with Matt offline. This is our compromise, which is rather than require someone get trained, require them to pay money in order to get that certification, we ask that one person involved in the rental be designated as managing crowd control. If you're gonna be designated for managing crowd control, you should have a tour of the facility so you know where the entrances and exits are. That simple. So what we're asking of that person is to know the building, but not necessarily to take on a certification as a crowd control manager. We can certainly then encourage them to obtain the online certificate in crowd management from the National Fire Protection Association, but we do not require it. If the renter is uncomfortable designating someone, we'll say renter user, is uncomfortable handling that themselves, they can request that a district employee who is trained in crowd control management be assigned at the renter's expense.
Right, that is perfect.
Okay, so that's where we landed. How does everybody feel about that?
With the exception of huge events like the wrestling tournaments and things,
Then they have a police
yeah,
officer.
police, those.
That's
have-
500.
Yeah, I don't think that crowd control will necessarily be a huge issue, but I think any event, somebody there should know where exits, emergency exits might be and where people can and can't go.
Yeah, and those thresholds are still in the policy, so if you're at 250 people or more, you need somebody who's designated for crowd control.
You know, how will we know that there's a designated person?
Basically, they'll be asked to take a tour, and their name will be listed,
Okay.
yeah.
We need to know the number of people coming
You won't know
prior
that for
to
the-
an event.
We can
Or-
make
Or
assumptions.
arrange,
for-
yeah,
Well,
that's, yeah.
well, at that point, what they would have to do is agree that no more than 249 people could be in that, could participate or be there without having previously designated someone with the superintendent. And that would be the rule that they had to live by. If they thought there would be more than 250, to be allowed to let them in, they would have to follow this action.
Do we need to somehow, how are we relaying this to the district?
Well, they'd have it right on their application.
Right,
What if what are the PTO and PTA?
so when you
Well-
decide you need a facility, who do you tell that you need to use the
Chris
facility?
Gallo?
So,
Principal.
If you have that many people, is the administration there?
No, I'm thinking like Glow Dance.
Well, you gotta, well, our administrators have all taken the certificate, all taken the training, so
Right.
they're all certified.
But they're not
So
always
who's
there.
there for school staff when you have glow dance?
Sometimes no one, except for the custodian.
how many people are at the glow dance?
I don't know the actual tally. I don't want to speak of, because we have a clicker.
Mhm.
I can't speak on.
So you would
We're
just
gonna have-
designate yourself as
I
the
would
crowd
designate
control
myself
person.
as a crowd control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would just have to make sure, I just, do we have to put in policy or do we have something else that the administrators say, okay, you're gonna host this event here, do you have a crowd control? Someone designated as crowd.
I mean, my expectation is that whoever, Matt and the facilities coordinator should be in communication with administrators about making sure that any event, PTO or regardless, is properly staffed. And that they should know to tell you that we need, now that this is in policy, they need to know to tell you that if it's gonna be more than 250, you need a designated crowd control person. If there's more than 500, you need a police officer.
Does that have to be written, like how we communicate that, or this is fine?
I mean,
Well, this policy will be reviewed by the principals, okay, as soon as we get it through. But, I'm sitting here thinking, we ought to have this policy be part of the application. That it be, when somebody indicates they're using the facility
For
for
sure.
whatever reasons, this policy is attached to their application. They have to see this policy.
Does that need to be in here?
I don't know if
This
it's in
policy
here
will
now
be
that I'm sitting
attached
here
to all rental
Thinking about it.
enforcement. We could have
The policy should
all
be-
users will be provided with this policy.
Yeah.
it should be in the school
Upon
facility
application.
rental process. We can add that this policy will be provided to anyone as part of the online application, something like that.
Yep.
Not just online, anyone
Or just any.
seeking space.
All right.
And then that leaves it open to online, that leaves it open to,
Shall be provided this policy. I have a feeling that does happen. Okay, thank you. I will add that. We did not change anything in terms of no keys will be given to renters, which I will put into users.
oh, and I'm sorry, one more thing about
Mhm.
that I have in my notes here,
Yeah.
questioning. In terms of crowd control, does that mean inside and outside of the school?
Only if your event was occurring outside the school,
Yeah.
Right,
like is the glow dance outside the school?
no, but the block party is
Where's the block party?
Oh,
on
that's,
Rumford Street.
oh yeah, the city, yeah,
You
block,
close the street down? Oh, yeah,
I think it's
It's
all
an
encompassing.
activity.
It's
It's
where,
one of
it's
the-
wherever the event is taking
Yeah.
place.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, when we have a prom, the kids use the facility, they have the appropriate folks there to do it, so, police.
And aren't there lots of staff at the block
But
party?
we don't, the block party, we don't have anyone with a clicker.
No, it's, cause it's,
We don't know if 500 people show up.
but, aren't there a lot of school staff there? Block parties,
If they sign up to volunteer,
wow, that used to be a huge,
the custodial staff is
Teacher
always
thing.
there.
I mean, I would think that,
I think you have to go by your experiences, what have
Yeah.
you had at block party, has it been fight?
I don't know.
Well, you have
We don't have-
300 and something youngsters and your
That's
360
what I mean,
youngsters.
assuming they all come and they bring a
Right, and then a
parent.
you're talking easily over 500.
I'm just trying to talk this out of like what this would mean. Because
Yeah,
that would
I
mean a
mean,
police
I-
officer.
although if you've never had a police officer,
Never
now
had
they start having to have one.
Yeah, you would.
It's 500, I mean,
But,
Sure,
and that's not on,
500.
that's not really fully on school grounds either.
Right, cause you close off Rumford
I
Street.
would absolutely have a police officer.
Well, at that point, you have to see what
We
the
didn't-
city
back when we
requires
had
to
the
Well,
old
close
we
like
get
that,
a
down.
we have
permit
to
from the
use the
city,
city.
we get barriers from the
Yeah.
city, we get a permit
Yeah,
from the city.
but I mean, the city may require you to have
It's the whole street.
someone there too.
The old playground at Kimball didn't
They
need the
have,
street
they
closed
have
down.
not required
It's
us to
huge.
have,
Okay.
but this policy would be different. I'm just trying to follow policy.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
I
no.
hear you. No, I hear you, I hear you.
Well, in an emergency, in a situation that we don't like to really think about, you need to have someone who's trained in crowd control, and by crowd control, it's go this way, away from the fire, or from whatever, the fireworks, or whatever it happens to be. That's what you need to think about as to what we need to have.
Although if you're closing the street down, that's a city permit. You go through code enforcement? Yeah, so
Yeah, so that's covered.
you're
But
not,
as long as those
using-
people aren't getting on the
But
school
they may use the
property.
bathrooms in the school.
Correct,
I'm
but,
just
right,
trying
but
to
you don't
talk
have
through the
300
use of
people in the
facility.
school at the same
Bathroom.
time using the
Correct.
bathroom.
Correct.
They're all outside on Rumford Street, which is not school property. It doesn't mean they can't get down and swing on the swing sets and all that. That's but your event takes place on the public street. So you have to go through the
City
city
on that.
policies. This wouldn't apply to that event.
If you had them on,
I'm asking these
well,
Just
no.
where, I have done so many community events, I got you.
If you would have 300 people on the property of the school, now you would be in.
Right,
that.
I'm
I
surprised the
get
city
that,
hasn't suggested
but that's what I was.
right, so it sounds like to me that there's gonna be some changes to the glow dance, and there's gonna be some changes to anything where you don't, where you expect more than 250 people to come. There's an expectation.
But the city's never asked you to get a police officer.
Not to my knowledge, but I've never been the one to submit that.
So my advice too would give code enforcement a call and ask, and just ask for whoever got the permit, just take a look at it.
But they give
Like
us
I-
the police the.
Yeah, the city comes and gives you the barriers and all that, and it's on there. Yeah, we had a neighborhood block party once, and you go through that whole process. But I don't, because that's on Rumford Street, none of this applies to that event. You're not renting you're not using a school facility, you're using a street, a public street. If it were still the old,
Number of people, I don't
right,
know.
right,
Think I'm,
Yeah,
But
if
then
you were
that's
in
the
the
city.
fenced-in area,
Right.
it'd
Interesting
be
event.
different.
I may have known about it.
Kathleen's gonna
Kathleen's
come.
like,
Yeah, I'm
don't
not
tell me
familiar with
any,
that
it's like
event.
such a
No,
liability.
it used to be,
She's gonna come.
back when it was Kimball School, there was two huge playgrounds, the rock wall, all the games with the cakes and the raffles and everything, it was all on the playground. And it started like right after, yeah, it started right after school.
Kids are climbing on the rock.
So that was on the playground, so that would have been
But
different.
we have they have their certificate of liability from the company, we
Yeah.
have our certificate of liability.
Yeah, you don't, if the city isn't saying you need a police officer, then you don't need a police
Yeah,
officer.
and you're
I know
not
you
in
might
the-
not like that, but it's a city street,
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
as long as
Stay
they're
in your
not on
lane.
the school property, you really can't enforce that.
Right.
Yeah.
Like at the Ability Road Race, because we cross a couple of busy intersections by the hospital, now I have to have 2 police officers. That's a lot of money. But it's non-negotiable, they won't give me a permit for the race if I don't do that.
No, they don't, and they don't negotiate this.
Yep.
And that's
No
Boku
negotiation.
bucks.
Yep, all right, so,
Okay.
I get it.
everybody,
Sorry about that.
no, please don't apologize, I think this is.
No, these are really, this is
Right.
good conversation.
Yes, it's
to have on
important to
TV.
know what's actually going on in the schools, how we create consistency, how we create equity, how we give discretion when we need to waive fees, how we carve out exceptions for PTOs and boosters. These are all things that I think were just conversations that were had, but never set in policy. So it makes perfect sense why it would be difficult to work through all of it into a good policy. I would like a good policy.
Right.
So if we have to keep working on this, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
And making sure that we're not leaving anyone out and we're not being overly cumbersome, like with the crowd control thing. We just need to make sure that it's reasonable for anyone using our facilities.
Right. But in that event, it's the population of the school using the facility.
Right.
It's not an outside, it's an event at the school.
Right.
Which now takes place on city property, so, she's giving me the face, Kathleen.
Yeah.
You're giving me the face.
It's exception number 532 to all of the things we could possibly think of.
I made notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm on it.
Yes. One other change that we did make is rather than saying that somebody needs to be assigned at a door the entire event, that somebody just needs to be monitoring during the arrival and leaving period. We added language that the superintendent may require one or more district employees to be on site to supervise. It depends on the event, number of attendees, and number of supervising volunteers. So this is giving Kathleen quite a bit of discretion.
So when they have their block party, I can insist that.
You actually can.
Yeah. You could attend too, that'd be great.
That's right, I'll be the, whatever the,
You need to be trained.
Under,
it's
oh, no,
true,
we're
I
not
need
there
to
yet.
take that.
Yep.
Prohibited conduct is next.
Yes, so prohibited conduct, section F, the only change we made was an addition of a number 2 at the request of our committee, which now states firearms and weapons are not permitted on school property.
Yeah, and that's what I want to address. The legislature, thank you very much, just passed a bill in July that says that individuals are no longer, we cannot prohibit them from legally possessing a firearm or storing a firearm or ammunition in their parked car on school property under Second Amendment. Governor Sununu said we cannot prevent people from bringing weapons on board school property. However, when you look at our policy on weapons, and I know we're going to review that
We're
down the
gonna
line.
review that one too.
Yeah, I pulled it and it says, currently kids absolutely cannot bring weapons on board. But that staff, that if individuals do bring weapons, what's gonna happen is, let me read the language, members of the public who violate this policy, of bringing weapons into school buildings may be reported to local law enforcement if possession of the weapon is used in a threatening, harassing, or intimidating manner. So looking at this new law, what I'm thinking is, my recommendation to the committee is either, I came up with some proposed language that is either you say nothing about weapons in the policy, okay, because you're gonna have to separate, it may get more intricate, you're gonna have to separate kids, students, parked cars, those kinds of things. You could say something along the line of, law enforcement will be notified if a weapon is brought on school property and used in a threatening, harassing, or intimidating manner, which is what happened with, last time we had that political group.
Yeah,
Somebody
there
called
was
and
no
they saw it.
harassment or
Right,
anything.
but they
and
saw it and they
yeah,
called.
right.
Right.
So unfortunately, right now under the gun laws and the impact by our governor, technically non-students and, adults are allowed to bring guns on
Right.
school property.
So if you'll remember, we had this
And
discussion.
you asked me and I
Be-
said,
yeah.
ignore, but this law just passed on
Gosh, so we can't.
July 27th.
Right.
I mean, I'm aware of that law, but I still think this is saying are not permitted, we could even say by the school district on school property, or not permitted, it doesn't say it's prohibited. It's saying we don't want it to be on there, but we can't legally enforce it, if someone brings it.
Right.
It doesn't mean we're gonna, we have the legal authority to do anything about it.
So you're just saying not permitted, so what if I said, well, under the Second Amendment, I can bring my gun anywhere I
How
want?
about our
We can't
just-
we can't legally enforce you to not bring it, but we
Right.
are asking that you do not.
I was
So
gonna
why
say, so
not
why do
put
we have it
that-
in policy if
Why don't
it
we
can't
put
be?
that in our application process and say, we're requesting no weapons be brought on. But I think if we say something like, we could be challenged, especially since it's very clear you can even have them locked in your car. You're supposed to have them out of sight though, and ammunition as well.
I mean, I'd like to see some language in the policy about firearms and weapons, given our state, however we want to word that.
So I will say that there is language that is similar to what you're suggesting in G, which is any person who violates this policy or any other acceptable standard of behavior may be asked to leave school grounds by authorized personnel who may also at their discretion contact law enforcement.
Yep.
So we could beef that up a little bit in terms of, the threatening, the language you suggested in terms of threatening.
Yeah, and it's in our current weapons policy where it says threatening, harassing, or intimidating manner. If they bring a weapon on board and somebody sees it, and they feel that
It could be threatening to them if they see it.
Yeah.
That's, just having it on your hip is not a
Not
threat,
threatening.
Could be to someone.
but not legally, it's not a
Right,
threat.
it's not
You have a
legally,
right to
but
carry a
that's
firearm.
exactly what happened
It's
at
traumatic.
the high school when students saw it, and then they panicked,
It's traumatic. It's on a school property. It's not as though we're seeing someone carry it downtown. I mean, to think about weapons on school property.
I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm saying the law disagrees with
Yeah,
us.
And this is what we talked about before, which is that I think it is proper for us to make a statement about what we would like to see on our school grounds, while also not being in direct violation of the law. I think if you have language for us to consider, if you want to send it to, because clearly we're going to have to see this one more time, will you send it to me, and then I'm going to give us some options, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna look at not what it looks like to have nothing at all, what it looks like to have something very simple and basic, what it looks like to be in conformance with
Karen, you'll
law.
send that to-
And then we can make that decision, but I would just say it's 7:00, and maybe maybe tonight's not the night to debate
a complex-
guns on school property.
It's a complex
Because I think we
topic.
all recognize that
Well,
it
this
is a safety issue.
pretty beefy policy, so there's a
Yeah.
lot, I think.
Yep. The one last thing I will say is in G for enforcement, we added, after our discussion, any renter who violates the conditions of this policy may, again, at the discretion of the superintendent, be ineligible for future facility rental.
Yep.
And that basically just puts a little teeth in.
Quick question.
Yep.
Prohibited conduct, FE, smoke or otherwise used tobacco products?
Well, we already have a policy that says that.
And vaping is included as
Yeah.
smoking? Okay,
Well,
as long as,
we have that policy to bring to you too.
Okay.
Smoking, vaping.
just the definition of someone saying, I'm not smoking a tobacco product,
You're
Right.
vaping a tobacco
I'm
product.
I'm vaping a nicotine product.
Is it
It's not,
nicotine?
no, tobacco is not nicotine, nicotine is in tobacco, but tobacco contains all the other items, that's what they would come in and say.
So we have a policy on that it's coming to you, we've already.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Just
But
want it to be a little
Yep.
more,
I agree.
Robust.
I want to include it, yes, I want it to be a little more robust, so that you can't
Let me
vape.
understand this correctly, then what you'd like to do is take the recommendations of the verbiage tonight.
Yep.
And put it into the policy, we'll bring it back to the policy committee?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
I think that's
substantive
the right
enough.
thing to do.
Yeah,
Can I suggest that with the class size policy, that I actually put a policy together? What I brought to you tonight was the recommendations from the instructional committee.
Well, it was both committees, but.
but I think you should.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the end of the night, we didn't write a policy.
Right,
We just,
so I will put that policy into the format that we use for policies, how's that?
That would be
And we'll
great.
bring that back for the next meeting?
Yes,
that's
I think
good.
that's a great idea. And honestly,
Alright.
because we didn't record that committee and it was such a great discussion, if you would be willing to give a summary at the outset of the meeting, like what that discussion felt like, what, kind of,
It was a
any,
good discussion.
any back and forth that
Yeah.
would be relevant for the committee
it was
to
the perfect
know.
marriage of policy-minded people and teachers that are trying to follow the policy.
Nice.
So, well, let's do this. No, that won't work because of this. And let's say it this way. No, that won't work because of this. It was a good conversation.
Awesome.
So I'll bring it in the format that you.
That would be great. Wonderful. Is there any energy left in my brain to even ask what the question comes next? Are there any other questions, discussion points, anything that you would like to address on the next agenda that you've been thinking about and haven't brought up yet? Anything?
Not that comes to mind.
All right.
So the next
But this was a
agenda
very good
will be
discussion
Yeah,
tonight.
yeah.
Use, further facilities use, class size, and what else?
Well, we have quite a few coming down the
Down the
pike,
pike.
so,
I'm gonna give you that list, because I have it on
There is a
my-
never ending.
There is a- Policies never end. Policies that we need to think about. We need to review the suicide policy.
yep,
Data governance has to be done annually, so we need to do that one. Obviously, the biggie, Title IX. Vaping, pregnancy, and weapons, that's in the pipeline.
Okay.
It's a lot, but.
it's okay.
Give it to us.
Right, it has
Yeah.
to get done, and it's,
But we're, you
To
know,
Liz's
you
point,
say
the
that,
longer
but
it
your
is-
policies are really in good shape.
Mhm.
Don't think that you're like way behind the eight ball, because you're not.
Yeah.
You're in great shape. Even your Title IX, you have a policy, it's not like you don't have anything, so, we'll get to this.
Yeah, unfortunately, the new Title IX has 6 other policies that are implemented in the revision, so I'm trying to bring them all to you at the same time, so when I say see policy, you can look right at it.
Mhm. Okay. That sounds good. I mean, if there are things that, like the data, like things that need to happen annually, that I assume will be mostly a review and then just moving forward.
Right.
Like, if we can just make sure there's always something like that on the agenda, so that we can just move
Something
through.
that
check
can
off
move
the-
quickly.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep,
Just to kind of keep
will do.
us moving. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Anybody want a second?
Second.
You're on.
Yep.
Arm wrestle.
As we say, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned at 7:07. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. No, it was good. This was.